Good morning, friends. Welcome to Community Church. My name is Dean, and I'm just thrilled to be with you. Those of you who are present here, those of you who are present remotely on Zoom and YouTube. We gather every Sunday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and 80,000 subscribers on YouTube are suddenly there. Not really, but we have sort of a different demographic now. We have less people here and a lot of people in bed drinking coffee and reading their papers and having church online. So that's a beautiful thing, and we're so glad you're with us. Today, I light the candle for Bob Franke. Those of you in the music songwriting world know his name. He was a giant in the world of Boston songwriting all the way back into the early 70s. He and his wife had just moved to a retirement home in Antigua, Guatemala. I was going to visit them in February, but he was hit by a speeding motorcycle trying to cross the street, cobblestone streets of Antigua, Guatemala, and he didn't make it. And the folk world is grieving. I want to start with a song written by Bob Franke. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly is the chorus. And sing it and feel it inside you. The thunder and lightning gave voice to the night. The little lame child cried aloud in her fright. Hush, little baby, a story I'll tell of a love that's vanquished the powers of hell. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. Sweetness in the air and justice on the wind. Laughter in the house where the mourners had been. The deaf shall hear music, the blind have new eyes. The standards of death taken down by surprise. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. High. Release for the captives. New streams, no, an end to the wars. New streams in the desert, new hope for the poor. The little, oh shoot, the little lame children will dance as they sing and play with the bears and the lions in spring. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly high. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. Hush, little baby, let go of your fear. The Lord loves his own and your mother is near. The child fell asleep, the lantern did burn. The mother awaited her bridegroom's return. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. was thinking that that's the fourth person in my life who has lost their lives to a pedestrian accident in just the last, let's say, 3 years. Marcia Deal was a musician, sang here a bunch of times. Bicycle accident with a truck. Carolyn Poinelli, our beloved member, hit by a car crossing a crosswalk. My next door neighbor, same thing, car crossing a crosswalk, a teenager texting. And now Bob Franke. I resolve myself to be a more careful driver than I already am. And I hope the same for you all. And I think about something that, what's his name? The very well-known theologian who wrote a book called The Secular Harvey Cox said the following at Marcia Deal's memorial service at Old Cambridge Baptist Church. He said, let's think just as much about the people who were behind the wheel. They deserve our compassion and our prayers as much as the victims do. Thank you, Harvey, for saying those words in this moment that I'm feeling the loss of Bob Franke. Folks, this is going to be a very kind of Dean-focused, because I'm doing the music and I'm doing the announcements. I'm hoping that this church will step up and have other people facilitate, other people do announcements, other people do what I'm about to do now, which feels like a third grade show and tell. I want to show you some new acquisitions of mine. This is from Veterans for Peace. They gave it to me in sort of thanks that they're kind of having trouble with their organization, and we have offered to have them meet here and do a Zoom here one Friday a month at 4:30 p.m. And I got this T-shirt out of it, and it reminded me of Jim Casteris, who took care of this building for 30 years, and he was the most avid member of Veterans for Peace. He was a Korea War veteran. He's now in a memory unit in Belfast, Maine. And so Jim Casteris, we wrote a card for you, and we're going to get some more people here to sign the card as well. And on the back, it's Smedley Butler spoke here at Community Church in 1935. War is a racket, a few profit, the many pay. Major General Smedley Butler, USMC, and what a story that man has. The next T-shirt was a gift from Sonny Robinson. Her partner, named Jean Gallo, was remembered by about 60 people in this tiny auditorium last Sunday. And I got this T-shirt. It's a tribute and commemoration of the 4 church women who were murdered in 1980 in El Salvador. El que pierde la vida por la causa mía la encontrará. She who loses her life for my cause will find it. Matthew 16:25. I also have another T-shirt. Where is it? Kind of like this one website that's called Jujumini, and they sell great T-shirts. If you can't read it, it says, radicalized by basic decency. And thank you for all of those hundreds of thousands who were on the Common yesterday for radicalizing for basic decency. I wasn't there. I was at a farmer's market where I am every Saturday selling coffee and crafts from El Salvador. But I also bought another one from that website that just says resist, and it has all the Muppet characters. And I'm going to get another one that says chinga la migra. I don't know if you know what that means, but it means, and I'll say it in church, fuck ICE. I said it. This is another acquisition from the estate of Joan Livingston. It's an acquisition because I actually sold this to her. The embroidery comes from a lady who's a friend of mine in El Salvador, and she embroiders all kinds of hats. Some of them are over here. It says BDS, Boycott, Divest, and Sanction. And Joan passed away about, what was it, like 6 months ago. And I bring this to your attention to say that we're going to have a giant book sale on the sidewalk next week. Charlie Welch, who is Joan's fiance, and I will be doing that next Saturday. And we have a lot of books to try to get rid of, including all of these books on the table that are all theater books. Half of them Shakespeare. They came from the estate of another member passed about 4 years ago, Bob Datilio. So am I done with my show and tell? No. 2 books, one by last week's speaker, Christian Nill, who spoke about his Peace Corps experience in Guatemala. Just a lovely, inspired talk from Christian. Thank you, Chris, for being with us from El Paso, Texas. And this one, Sarah Towell was with us for an immigration teach-in about 2 weeks ago, and she will join us again next Sunday, October 26th. Her book is called Crossing the Line, Finding America in the Borderlands. So both of these books, and we have a few extra copies of these if you're interested. Let's see, what else? Here's an online event featuring 2 luminary and beloved clergy persons, Reverend John Gibbons, who happens to be with us this morning and will be with us this afternoon as well, senior minister at UU Bedford for many, many years, and apprentice to a Mexican healer woman and a salesman of pansies. I didn't know that. Rabbi Susan Abramson, the longest female rabbi in New England. The longest. How long is she? 1980, since 1984. Anyway, this is sponsored by Women's League for Peace and Freedom, and that's on Wednesday, October 26th, 22nd. The information is on here, and it's also on our website and Facebook page. So that should be a great Wednesday online, 7 p.m. And here's the card for Jim Costeris. And finally, no, not finally. Last night we had a mess of people here for David Rovics and Kamala Emanuel. And as usual, a wonderful program. David is the people's history of the world told in song, just stories. Story after story in the songs, and it was a remarkable night, and we always drop everything when David is on his way to us to hear his latest songs about the latest horrific outrages in the world. This is we have a few of these around. This is his work around Gaza and Palestine. It's called Falastin Habibti. So finally, I keep saying finally, and there's always something else. What's today, October 19th or 20th? 19th. This is a day book from Eduardo Galeano, Uruguayan, a favorite author of mine, and it's called Children of the Days. I love to read these, and I should have somebody else read them in the future. This is called Invisible, October 19th. 2,500 years ago, at dawn on a day like today, Socrates took a small stroll around Piraeus with Glaucon, Plato's older brother. Glaucon told the story of a shepherd from the kingdom of Lydia who once found a ring, slipped it on his finger, and realized that no one could see him. The magic ring made him invisible in the eyes of all others. Socrates and Glaucon philosophized lengthily on the moral of the story, but neither of the two wondered why women and slaves were invisible in Greece, even though they never used magic rings. the gospel according to Eduardo Galeano. We are very happy that we will be joined for our luncheon after the meeting by Reverend John Gibbons, who we're just so proud that he has joined us, joined our team as what we call an affiliate minister, which is a retired real minister and a fount of wisdom around a lot of things, hopefully around building beloved congregation, number one, and around also activist juju, which we want to have even more than we have, which is a lot already. John is a leader in the struggle to change the name of Faneuil Hall, in the struggle to achieve reparations for former enslaved people, and also in the protest that happens every Wednesday, and do come in Burlington at the ICE headquarters. So it's a remarkable thing that John is with us, and we'll talk to John and hear from John over lunch. Okay, I hope as many of you here can join us, and maybe we'll even Zoom it if we can figure it out how to do it around the table. But on the subject of preachers, this next song has a great line. It says, "Deliver us from the creepy preachers with their narrow minds and their very wide lapels." This song is written by Susan Werner, and I just like to say that I'm not a minister, but I do this job here at this church. So I call myself Irrev. And I think irreverence should be elevated to some sacred spot in the pantheon of things that we hold dear at this church, and maybe any church. I hate hubris and inflated sense of self-importance in any leader or rabbi or minister or whatever. Anyway, I always love that line. And here's the rest of the song. Thy kingdom come to every nation, thy will be done in everything we do. Lord, lead us not into temptation, and deliver us from those who think they're you. Lord, send us forth to be of service, to build the schools and dig the wells, and deliver us from the creepy preachers with their narrow minds and very wide lapels. Thy kingdom come to every nation, thy will be done in everything we do. Lord, lead us not into temptation, and deliver us from those who think they're you. Lord, give us strength to bring compassion to every corner of the world, and deliver and please allow for women in the Catholic priesthood, and remind the Pope that he could have been a girl. Thy kingdom come to every nation, thy will be done in everything we do. Lord, lead us not into temptation, and deliver us from those who think they're you. And deliver us from politicians who drop your name in every speech, as if they're your best friends from high school, as if they practice what they preach. Thy kingdom come to every nation, thy will be done in everything we do, and deliver us And Lord, lead us not, sorry, into temptation, and deliver us from those who think they're you. Amen. 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 You can clap now. Okay, now I get to introduce a new friend, and hopefully a longtime friend. I'm already really interested in looking into the possibility of taking some time off in March to go on a trip with John. In addition to all his books about world politics and U.S. policy abroad, he is deep into shamanism and Maya spirituality, and the prospect of a trip through archaeological sites of Guatemala, and also a trip through present day Maya spirituality is something that really interests me, and I'm trying to squint at my calendar and my checkbook and make it happen. John Perkins is a chief economist at a major consulting firm. He was advisor to the World Bank, the UN, the IMF, Fortune 500 corporations, and government and business leaders in Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, and the US. Before that, he apprenticed with shamans when he lived in the Amazon rainforest. His 11 books on economics, shamanism, and transformation have been published in many languages and have appeared on the New York Times bestseller list for more than 70 weeks. John, welcome. Take it away.
Thank you. Hi, thank you. Can you see
Hi.
me in here? Can you see and
We,
hear me?
we can see you, we can hear you.
Great. Well, thank you. It's so wonderful to be with you. And I have to say that I wish I were there in person. And I was hoping to be. Boston is my favorite city in the world. And I live on an island near Seattle, and I love Seattle also. But I went to college in Boston, and then for, let's see, over 10 years, I worked. The job of a chief economist that you mentioned was at a Boston firm, and in fact, every day I walked from the Boston Commons. I lived on that big building, Tremont on the Commons, and my office and our corporate offices were in the Prudential Center. So I walked through Copley Square every day, unless it was really snowing hard, in which case I took the T. Um, so anyway, I miss Boston, and I would be there, except I just came from the country of Georgia and Istanbul, where I was speaking at major events, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I think that the title here is something around, is the United States going to take over Panama, Canada, and and Greenland? And that's become kind of old news in a way, but I think it's particularly appropriate right now for what it represents symbolically and in so many ways, because all three of those countries are democracies, and and President Trump has threatened to take them over one way or another. And in doing so, he sent a very, very strong message out to the world that we don't give a damn about democracy. All we care about is, all he cares about at least, is power and expressing the ability to do that, to bully. And this isn't just about Trump. So what I write about in my books are about the Confessions of an Economic Hitman trilogy, and the most recent one came out about a year ago. It's about China's economic hitman strategy. What I write about in those books is how the United States for a long time has been this imperialist country, and now China's beating us at that game all over the world. So what we really are seeing, and I felt this so strongly yesterday as I marched in the No Kings Day parade or demonstration. It was a lot of fun. This island I live on is the size of Manhattan, but it's got a population of about 24,000. And there were probably 2,000 of those people were marching yesterday. And what really struck me at one point was how united we were as a pro-democracy movement. So I've been involved over the years in movements around climate change, around social justice, around many other causes, but this is one that unites all of those. One person had a sign that said, Environmental sustainability equals income equality or equals social equality, social justice." And I'm so struck as I work in Latin America so often that people in the Amazon rainforest, where I spend a lot of time, the indigenous people say, these groups come down that represent, that help us to try to save our rainforest environmentally. And then other groups come down and try to help us have better health care and other social services. And that they're separate. How can they be separate? It's all one thing. And so one of the things I found so significant about yesterday was it was a union, a uniting of various issues all around how do we protect democracy. In any case, I'm going to get into more of that in a few minutes and about where we're going in the world today and what I think about this. Because in the last 3 weeks, I've spoken at events where there were people there who were very strong representatives from 70 countries around the world. And many of them were leaders in opposition movements in places like Venezuela and uh, Nicaragua and Iran and North Korea and Turkey and many other places. These strong anti-dictatorship movements. And then yesterday, there was a rally that's anti-dictatorship in the United States. That's a very, very sobering thought. And one of the things that this brings up for me is that the United States and China right now are vying to, be the most powerful superpower in the world. And China's definitely winning. I have an interesting map here that you may be able to see. So it shows up in the top that in the year 2000, that in the year 2000 or two, is it that the United States was the number one trading partner. It's 2001, I guess, number one trading partner in 80% of the world's countries. By 2023, China had taken over and was the number one trading partner in 70% of the world's countries. Pretty interesting. And what strikes me about this, I taught an MBA program in China, in Shanghai, to mainly Chinese students, people who had been singled out as being the future leaders of China. And when I got there, very quickly, I realized why they had invited me was to learn about the mistakes I'd made as an economic hitman and the successes I'd had. So they would not repeat the mistakes and they would benefit from the successes. And they've done a bang up job. I mean, their economic hitmen are traveling around the world and they're telling a really, really powerful story. But perhaps even more importantly, the world is reacting against the United States. And I find this over and over and over again. It makes me very sad. I come from New England. I grew up in New Hampshire. My 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 forefathers go back to the 1600s in New England, fought in the American Revolution. I'm a very loyal American, but and as being a loyal American, I think it's important that we criticize our country so that we can get better. I'm sad to see this happening on the one hand. On the other hand, it may not be a bad thing that we're mirrors being held up to us, that we're having to look at ourselves the way much of the world has looked at us and for many years. This didn't begin with Trump. It's certainly been magnified during the last 8, 9 months, but it's been there for a long time. So let me get into that now. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories, true stories, and there's a bit of humor in them. At the time, I didn't find it very funny, but so here I was. attending business school at Boston University, about to graduate and facing the draft. I was strongly opposed to the Vietnam War. I was a disciple of Howard Zinn, who taught at BU and became a friend. I just was determined not to go to Vietnam, but I didn't want to go to jail either, and I didn't want to leave the country. I didn't want to be disloyal. And so I joined the Peace Corps. Before joining the Peace Corps, however, I accepted a job with the National Security Agency, the NSA, which was also possibly draft exempt. I'd gone through a whole bunch of lie detector tests for 3 days down in the federal building, down in City Hall in Boston, down right near City Hall, the federal building, and been offered this job in the National Security Agency as a trainee. But then I heard a Peace Corps recruiter speaking at Boston University, and I was really taken by that. And I'd always wanted to go to the Amazon rainforest. I love the idea that people survived in New Hampshire and during the winter, Indians living off nature, and then the pioneers also, and they learned from the Indians, my ancestors. And so I wanted to live like that. And I knew that one of the few places in the world where people still live like that, where there are Indians, indigenous people who live like that, was the Amazon. So, to make a long story short, I get back to the guy at the top of the NSA who'd recruited me. He was a good friend of my then wife's father. And so I had this in. And I said, hey, even though I've accepted a job with the NSA, I'm having second thoughts. I'm really interested in going to the Amazon. And he said, well, go. He says, like, go to the Amazon, join the Peace Corps. I'll help. If there's anything I can do to make this happen better, good, because you'll learn another language or a couple of languages, and you'll learn survival techniques, and you'll learn to live with another culture. And you'll be much more valuable to us here at the NSA when you get out. So go. And he said, but when you get out, you may not actually get a job with us. You may not be a card-carrying spy. You may work for a corporation because we have close ties with corporations. So anyway, next thing I know, I'm in a training program in Southern California where I'm learning Spanish in 8 weeks, which if you learn speak another language, that's not really sufficient. But anyway, and learning about credit and savings corps, how to form credit and savings corps. I had a business degree, and then I was sent deep into the Amazon rainforest to a community of the Shuar people. Now, the Shuar, if you've ever seen a shrunken head or a picture of one with all these strings hanging out of their noses and their mouths and their eyes, the Shuar did it because they're the only people that do that. There are other head hunters in the world, but they're the only head shrinkers. And in the late 60s, which is what we're talking about here, they were still shrinking heads, and they were very warlike people. And suddenly I'm being sent in there. But the interesting thing was that this is in Ecuador, South America, and it was a very, very difficult trip to get there. And it involved a long hike through very, very dense jungle. And as I'm hiking in through this jungle, there's people coming out, a few people coming out because they're going to go to market or whatever they're going to do. And I decided to practice my Spanish, my lousy Spanish on them. I'd been good enough to pass the State Department's test, but that's about it. And and as they're coming out and I'm going in, I'm speaking Spanish, and to my chagrin, I discover that I speak better Spanish than they do. They're Schwa. They speak Schwa. So this is where this whole thing. I think it's funny now. It wasn't funny at the time, but my realization is, my God, the U.S. government teaches you a language and then sends you to some place where nobody speaks it. And now I'm getting very homesick. I'm walking through the jungle and I'm crying. It's raining. It's a rainforest, so nobody can tell I'm crying. But I'm thinking, I should have gone to Vietnam. But I finally get to the community where I'm supposed to spend the next 2 years. And the school teacher who speaks Spanish, he's from the Andes, greets me. And I say, He said, what are you doing here? Why are you here? And I said, well, I'm here to help you form your credit and savings co-op. And he looks at me and he says, credit and savings? Like, we don't have any currency here. We don't have any money. It's all barter. My bananas for your papayas. What are you really doing here? Anyhow, so my second enlightenment about U.S. government work is they teach you a skill and then send you to some place where it can't be used. To make a long story short, I just was surviving there, and then I get very, very, very sick. I lost a lot of weight. I couldn't keep any food down. After a few days, and I couldn't get out of the jungle, I couldn't stand up. I couldn't get out of my sleeping bag on the dirt floor. And then a shaman saved my life. And he took me on this shamanic journey using a plant that a lot of people know about now, but nobody had ever heard of then, at least in my circles, ayahuasca. And during this journey, I saw that I had my eyes closed and I'm going through this wild experience. And the shaman says to me, touch the jaguar. Well, I'm in the middle of the jungle. It's the middle of the night. And I've heard jaguars out there. I've seen their tracks. And I look around, I open my eyes and I look around, and I'm lying on this bench and so I'm looking around. And the shaman says, no, 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 no. Just, and it was all going through the school teacher as a translator. Says, no, 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 just close your eyes and see the jaguar. And when you touch it, let it give you a gift. So I do this and I see this jaguar. And I hear my mother's voice saying, son, the food and drink will kill you. Well, in the Amazon, people don't drink water from the rivers because they know the rivers have organic matter. They know it's dangerous. They can't drink the water. So the women make a kind of beer by chewing manioc root and spitting it. And saliva sets up a fermentation process, a little bit like yeast. You get a kind of beer out of that, and then you can mix water to it, and it kills it's okay to drink. So I'm drinking a lot of spit beer because you got to rehydrate. And I'm eating a lot of very strange foods, squirming white grubs that are coming out of a rotting log that you eat live, and a lot of other strange, even stranger things I won't get into. And I realized that, and I saw on this shamanic journey that every time I ate these grubs or drank spit beer, I heard a voice saying, it'll kill you. At the same time, I saw how incredibly robust the Shuar were. The men are built like Rambo. And people live to be very old if they didn't die in hunting accidents or childbirth. And so I saw that night that it wasn't the food and drink killing me, it was my perception. And the next, a couple of days later, I'm healthy. The shaman comes back to me and demands that I become his apprentice. So I had no desire to be a shaman's apprentice. There was no future in that in those days. I'd graduated from business school. I just wanted to get back to Boston and make a lot of money, go to work for this corporation or something and make some money. But he saved my life. So for the next couple of years, I was in training as a shaman deep in the Amazon. And one of the most important things I learned was that this idea of touching the jaguar, the shaman said to me, when you touch the jaguar, when you have a blockage of any kind, see it as a jaguar standing on your trail. When anything's getting in your way from doing whatever it is you want to do, see it as a jaguar standing in your trail. If you run from it, it'll chase you. But if you reach out and touch it, it gives you a gift. It helps you change your perception. Because he said, now this is this very old headhunter, illiterate, says to me, you know, perception molds reality. Profound. And he said, you know, when you change your mindset, your perception, and again, this is going mostly through a translator, although I was to learn that this guy who at the beginning didn't seem to speak any Spanish actually spoke quite a bit of Spanish. When you change your perception, you change your actions. And when you change your actions, you change reality. I think this is so important right now because We are really at a consciousness revolution in the world today. And it's all about how do we perceive ourselves as human beings on this planet. And there really is a war going on for our consciousness over how we do that. And it's particularly magnified in the United States right now. And then, therefore, it's magnified in the world because the United States has such power, and China is part of all of that. But in any case, back to the story, I realized that, it is all about perception. That's the basis of psychotherapy, changing perception. It's the basis of marketing. It's the basis of business. It's the basis of politics. It's the basis of quantum physics. It's everything. Nothing, almost nothing we humans do, we don't is not impacted by our perceptions, And so anyway, I spent the next couple of years uh, learning shamanism. And I also discovered that the reason the Peace Corps had sent me there, they knew I couldn't form a credit and savings co-op, but there was a colonization program that was modeled after the U.S. Homestead Act. So USAID, Agency for International Development, which no longer exists anymore, had come up with this plan this is in the late 60s, early 70s, during a period when we believed in the United States that there was a red tide taking over the world. We were losing the war in Vietnam. That was going to enable the communists to take over the whole world. And Latin America was a prime target because of all the resources it had. And so USAID decided that, well, there's all this growing socialism in the cities, there's this unrest. We need to get poor people out of the cities and out to the jungle, which is vacant territory. So they sent planes out, look down at these vast forests, see there's just one little hut here, and another one there, and a little community here. Nobody lives out in that part of it. Nobody lives over here. Nobody lives over here. Let's get the poor people from the Andes and send them out there to cut the trees and grow crops and cows, especially beef. The United States wants lots of beef, so let's get out there and produce beef. And so they modeled it after our Homestead Act of the late 1800s in the United States, so that anybody who went out and cleared the forest of a certain amount of the land and put a cow on it, planted some grass, put a cow on it, owned the land. And so the Peace Corps was deeply involved in helping this process. The little community, the Schwa community that I was sent to, was a way station. So the Peace Corps was moving all these tools and surveying equipment because they needed to survey and legalize this under the government laws. And food, bulgur, all these wheats that were donated by USAID, they were being stored in my community. And my job was to protect them. Well, we would later discover that this program, and I began to see this much earlier than anybody else because of where my involvement was a stupid program. I mean, it wouldn't work. First of all, it wasn't that there were nobody living there, because if you have a little community here and you have a little Schwa house here and another one there and another one there, and there's lots of land in between. These are hunters and gatherers. They need lots of land. That was their land. And we were saying, no, 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 we're just going to take it over. So it caused wars between, while I was there, I was involved in some wars between the Shuar and the colonists. And second of all, the land in the Amazon, contrary to what most of you probably think, is the worst land in the world, next to the second worst in the world, the first being the deserts. For growing anything, it's extremely thin, the soil. The plants basically are self-sustaining. Leaves fall, trees die, and they create enough nutrients for other plants to grow. Um, so when you cut the trees, and the rains come, they wash away the topsoil, which is very thin, and you've got clay that the sun comes out and bakes it to pottery. Basically, the earth becomes pottery. It doesn't work. It was a terrible, it was a colonialistic policy. Really, what it boiled down to was the US's fear of communism and driving poor people into conditions that were even ultimately worse. was a hell of an education for me. And after that, I was recruited by a company in Boston, Charles T. Main, which got sold out and actually went into bankruptcy and sold out in 1984, I think. So it no longer exists. But it was a 100-year-old consulting firm. We had, what would we have, 8 floors in the southeast tower of the Prudential Center and another couple up in the main tower. It was a big company. We had about 2,000 professionals and then support staff. And we were very, very low profile. We were very, very influential with USAID, with the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the United Nations, um, the U.S. Treasury Department and the State Department. We were extremely instrumental in cutting a deal with Saudi Arabia in 1973. I write about these things in my books. My real job when I joined this company, I became an economist for this company and very soon chief economist and built up a department. My job was to identify countries that have resources our corporations wanted, like oil, and then arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sister organizations. But the money never actually went to the country. The country had was on, had an agreement that they were providing the collateral for the loan, usually their oil or some other resource. But the money would actually be transferred from an account in a World Bank in Washington, say, to a big engineering company like Bechtel in San Francisco or Brown and Root in Houston or Stone and Webster in Boston. And these companies then would use this money to build huge infrastructure projects in the country, things like electric power systems, highways, ports, airports. And these were things that benefited the very wealthy, those who own the industries, who own the commercial establishments that benefited from this infrastructure. But it actually hurt everyone else because money was diverted from social services, from education and healthcare and other such things to pay the interest on the loans. And in the end, the principal couldn't be repaid. And that was actually part of the strategy. And so we'd go back in, usually in the guise of the IMF. I'd go back in with my people and we'd say, okay, so let's restructure your loan. But you got to agree to some conditionalities. You got to sell your oil or whatever the resource was real cheap to our corporations. Let us build a military base on your soil. Privatize your water and sewage systems and your schools and sell them to our investors. Vote with us on the next critical vote against Cuba in the United Nations or some such thing. And we really, in this process, we were creating an empire, an American empire, a corporate empire more than anything. And yet, at the time when I was doing this, for most of my career doing this, I thought I was doing the right thing. I came out of the Peace Corps. This company, I go to Boston, I'm recruited, and the president and other people in the company tell me, well, you weren't really doing very much good in the Peace Corps, but you learned a lot. And now we're going to use this here to do a really good job because when you build these infrastructure projects, my job was to convince the countries to accept these deals. That was my job. And we were not a construction company. We were an engineering company that would design programs and projects. But my job as economist was to arrange the financing and to get the president or minister of finance or whoever in all these countries throughout Asia, uh, places like Iran, Indonesia, Ecuador, Peru, Guatemala, and Argentina, Chile, Panama, on, to accept these deals. And uh, we would produce these reports that showed that when you invest that kind of money in infrastructure projects, the economy grows. The GDP, gross domestic product, grows. And it does. And you can show that statistically. So I thought I was doing something good. GDP per capita is increasing. Now, doesn't this mean that everybody's getting better off? Per capita means per person. And I believe that because business school had taught me that, and the World Bank continued, and all these other organizations continue to promote that. And then the head of state of Panama, Omar Torrijos, who became a friend and was strongly opposed to this. He was negotiating the Canal Treaty with Jimmy Carter and eventually successfully. And he took me aside and he says, John, don't you realize you're lying to yourself and the world? You're not helping the people of these countries. You're hurting them. Per capita simply means GDP divided by the number of people. I said, yeah, I know that. And he said, well, do you know what GDP is? Yeah, I know what GDP is. It's the prosperity of a country. No, he said it measures how well the wealthy are doing, primarily, and big corporations. It doesn't measure what people in markets are doing, out in the country. It doesn't measure what most people are doing. It measures how well, but most people by population numbers, it measures how well those in control, those who own the government, those who own the industry are doing. You're lying to yourself and the world. That was 7 years in to this job that I finally began to understand. But then I didn't want to get out. I'm making a lot of money. I grew up the son of a school teacher in New Hampshire at a boys' private boarding school in New Hampshire. I was surrounded by wealthy kids, but I didn't have any money. The school gave us a house and food. I ate in the boys' dining room. I ate with 200 some odd boys from the time I was 4 years old. We weren't, we had good lives, but no money. And I'm surrounded by kids with lots of money and lots of amazing stories about, living in on Park Avenue in New York or the best part of Paris or wherever they happen to come from. And suddenly now I'm living that, and I've always wanted to. I'm traveling around the world, flying first class, staying in the best hotels, wining and dining with presidents and beautiful women in the finest restaurants of the world. I don't want to believe what I know to be true. And I think there's a lesson here that there's a hell of a lot of people today in government and in other positions that feel that way, which is probably, you know, in some respects, the biggest challenge of movements like the No Kings movement, to convince those people uh, that what they're doing is not right, is detrimental to democracy, and detrimental to social justice. And my hope right now is that enough of them are being fired or laid off or whatever that they'll begin to really understand this, and along with the demonstrations, the No Kings Days, and all the other things that are going on. That's another story. Let me go on with with mine. In any case, um, eventually I quit and have devoted the rest of my life, or most of the rest of my life, to trying to use what I know about this system to change it. And the system that we've created, that I helped to create, is something that we call a death economy. It's an economic system that's consuming and polluting itself into extinction. I think we all know that. I think everybody that's listening to this program knows that. And it's based on the goal of maximizing short-term profits for corporations and materialistic uh, good materialism for everybody else. That's the assumption. That's the goal, regardless of the social and environmental costs. Maximize short-term profits and consumer materialism. Maximize. And it's created this global economic system that's failing us, that's degenerative. So I am devoting my life today to, and I just mentioned I came back from these speaking tours, which I'm blessed to be invited. These books that I've written have made a splash around the world, 38 languages officially, and there's more out there. And it's very, very interesting to me how that's happened. This was a book that was rejected by 39 publishers, and before they published it's still, the original was published in 2004, and it's still very, very influential, and including in China. Anyway, um, so my job is to transform this death economy to a life economy. And a life economy is an economic system that pays people to clean up pollution, to mine all the plastic that's floating around in the oceans, for example, and reuse it, to regenerate destroyed forests, destroyed environments all over, to recycle, to come up with new technologies like we've been doing with solar and wind and so many others that we haven't even thought of yet. You know, we know that we can create energy out of air and water. So let's do it. So that's a life economy. It doesn't mean we all got to go back and live in caves. Maybe nobody's going to be living in huge mansions, I hope, but but we're going to pay people to do all the amazing things that need to be done. And the other side of the death economy, of course, is that it's very dependent on war or the threat of war, which is a big one that we're going through right now. You know, Trump just said that even though we're laying off everybody else, by God, you're going to keep the ICE agents and the military. They're going to keep being paid. So it's very much based on this war mentality as well as this extreme materialism. So my job was to promote that and I didn't realize it for a long, long time. So it brings us up to today, and I'm going to sort of quickly wrap this up and open it to see if anybody has any questions that I might be able to answer. But I think it's fair to say to all of you, uh, we should feel very, very blessed to be living at this time. Because what's really happening is we're being forced to reevaluate what it means to be humans, to be human beings, being human on this planet. We're at an evolutionary phase, and everything is coming together to force us to do that. The plant world is speaking to us. You know, I recently became a vegetarian, and a lot of people are, and there's a lot of interest in the medicinal plants like ayahuasca and San Pedro and so many other things. The plants are really speaking to us. Nature's speaking to us. Our government is speaking to us, demanding that we look at ourselves, demanding that we hold a mirror up to ourselves, demanding that we really reevaluate who we are and what it means to be humans. And at the same time, we are being confronted as a nation, as our leaders are being confronted, and I use leaders loosely, are being confronted by China, which is making incredible headways around the world. People across the planet are turning to China because they're fed up with the United States. We in the United States tend to talk about how the Chinese are anti-Muslim because of the Uyghurs. Well, that's the truth there. But most of the rest of the world, especially the Muslim world, and I just came from Istanbul and met with a bunch of Muslims there, and they'll say, well, but it's the United States that's been attacking uh, Afghanistan and Iraq and defending Israel against Palestine. You're the anti-Muslim country and so on and so forth. This goes so deep. So this whole issue of, Trump, it goes back to the title that Dean and I kind of came up with a number of months ago, and that began to seem almost irrelevant recently, but it isn't, because this idea that Trump wants to take over these democracies, Panama, where I spent a lot of time, Canada, and Greenland, is threatening to take them over. How do you think the rest of the world reacts to that? How do they look at it? Very much like how the world looked at the fact that this head of state of Panama, Omar Torrijos, who was my mentor in many respects, he and Jaime Roldos, the democratically elected president of Ecuador, were the only two heads of state that stood up to me, that did not buy into the deals I was offering, because these deals were very attractive to these leaders. And we had many ways to bribe them, also legally bribe them. I can talk about that during the Q&A if anybody's interested. But we made it very, very attractive. And at the same time, I always let people know, I like to say that, when I stood before a president, I would say, hey, in this hand, I've got billions of dollars for you and your family if you buy the deal. And if you don't, in this hand, I got a gun. I didn't actually carry a gun. But they knew, as I did, that the jackals, people we call jackals, were right behind me. These are CIA assets for the most part, not always, but usually. And they were responsible for overthrowing, and we've admitted to overthrowing and being involved in the death of Allende in Chile, of Mossadegh in Iran, of Lumumba in the Congo, of Arbenz in Guatemala, of Diem in Vietnam, on and on and on and on. So these leaders all know that. And when both Jaime Roldos and Omar Torrijos did not accept these deals, excuse me, um, and stood up to the United States. In the case of Roldos, it was over oil, that he wasn't going to turn his oil over to U.S. corporations. And in the case of Panama, it was the Panama Canal primarily. And these were leaders who were seen as stalwarts, Davids facing Goliath. And all over the world, the word went out. You leader of Nigeria, you can do what Omar Torrijos and Jaime Roldos are doing. And they both went down less than 3 months apart from each other in tragic private plane crashes that were incredibly suspicious. No smoking gun has ever been found because you don't find a smoking gun in a crashed airplane. But all over the word went out that these were CIA-sponsored assassinations. As I said, there's no proof. Uh, but that was the belief. And that sends a really strong message to every other leader around the planet. Stand up to the United States and you're in trouble. The jackals will come for you. Take these loans, make a lot of money, send your kids to college in the United States, and so on and so forth. So it's very sobering. And in a way, a similar message was sent when President Trump proclaimed that he might take over Panama, Greenland, and Canada. It sent this message out to the world. But I don't think it was a message that scared most people, although there is a threat there to everyone. But I think more than anything, it was a message that the United States can't be trusted because these are all allies. Canada, our closest neighbor, perhaps our greatest ally historically, it sent this message out. Don't trust the United States. You can't. And I think that message is becoming very, very clear around the world. And it's feeding right into China's hands. And believe me, China's economic hitmen are using it to their advantage. So again, I want to get back, and then I'm going to end and say that I think we should all feel blessed to be part of this time when we can get out and march, as so many of us did yesterday. And when we know that we've got to move to a life economy, we've got to transition, we've got to transform the death economy to a life economy. And what an exciting adventure to be able to do that. And we're also really, really being shaken. Like, okay, come on, guys, face up to it. Your country, the United States, has been doing a bad job. It started long before Trump. Trump has just magnified it, shone a light on it, really shone a light on it. It's come out of the dark. It's come out of all the shadows are coming up, but it's been going on for a very, very long time. And it's time that we change. And I have the great privilege of traveling around the world a lot, speaking at all kinds of events. In the last year, I spoke at events on every continent except Antarctica. And everywhere I go, I see that people are waking up. People are coming out. They're hearing these things. They're like you. They're inviting me to speak. Why are they doing that? And there's a huge consciousness revolution that's happening. At the same time, there's pushback, as there always is with every revolution. Now look at the Vietnamese demonstrations that I was deeply involved in Boston Common when I was in BU, and there was always this pushback. So when there's a revolution or an attempt at change, the status quo pushes back hard. And that's what's happening now. And we need to take strength from that to realize that every pushback is giving us energy. I've been a martial artist most of my life, and I know that if I'm up against a guy who's a lot bigger and stronger than me, I don't try to overpower him. I can use his energy against him. And that's what we've got to do now. Those who are pushing back at us, let's take their energy and move it against them. We did that yesterday, and we're doing it more and more and more. We need to keep it up. And we need to recognize that the big issue today is a death economy. Climate change, income inequality, species extinction, environmental destruction, those are all problems, but they're not the problem. They are symptoms of a problem that's much greater than all of that, which is this death economy, this degenerative economic system that's polluting and consuming itself into extinction. We're all part of it. So we all have a role to play in changing that. And I look forward to joining you in making that happen. And I think, Dean, I'll bring this to a close now and see if anybody has anything they'd like to participate in about this.
Yeah. Thank you, John. That was beautiful, and I'm glad you didn't just talk about Panama, Canada, and Greenland, and that was just a message of hope. I was going through my list of songs to figure out which one to do, and the first one that came to mind was the title track of my new record coming out in a month. It's called "You Gotta Have Hope," but I'm not going to do that one. Instead, I'm going to do a different song, but first I'll tell you that we have a collection plate over in the back, a beautiful basket full of the old cash that people used to use to donate money. There's also more modern forms on our website, like PayPal and credit card and so forth. We need your help to keep this thing going. What I'm going to sing is what I would have sung if I would have got a chance to sing at a No Kings rally yesterday. It's again a message of hope. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire. Is the refrain line that you can join me with on. The song is written by Gene Rowe, and it's also on this new record. And then we'll do some Q&A with John. Again, thank you so much, John. That was just great to hear from you. Atlantic and Pacific flow, the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, to the Gulf of Mexico, to the Gulf of Mexico, to the Gulf of Mexico. The land between sustains us all. To cherish her is our fervent call. Arise, arise, I hear the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire. We reached these shores from distant lands. We came with hungry hearts and hands. Some came by force and some by will, to the auction block and the darkened mill. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more died in your fields and your factories, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees, an old coat hanger in a room somewhere, a trail of tears, an electric chair. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire. And our great responsibility to be guardians of our liberty, till tyrants bend to the people's dreams, and justice flows like a mighty stream. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire. We lift our voices from the fire. Thank you, Gene Rowe, for writing that song. Quick rundown on what's coming up. I told you about Sarah Towell and her amazing book, Finding America in the Borderlands, Crossing the Line. She'll be with us online next week. After that, amazing lineup. Max Blumenthal, journalist who I follow probably more than any other on the YouTube online scene, told us he might be with us in person, which would be amazing because he has 2 small children and an amazing spouse. I'm really hoping to hear from Anya Parampil, who wrote a whole book about Venezuela and the plundering that the United States has done of the country of Venezuela. Week after that, Matthew Ho, a disabled veteran who ran for Senate in North Carolina, and has been with us before, and we'll look forward to having him again on what's known as Armistice Day instead of Veterans Day. And after that, a great one. This is just a really nice fall of speakers. Richard Wolff, economist, socialist economist. We call him our own Taylor Swift because he has a couple of videos on our YouTube channel that have over 1 million views. After that, we have Charles Coe, the poet and longtime Boston figure in the arts scene. And after that, a really cool one, we get to November 30th. Brendan Hughes is a filmmaker and podcaster who did a wonderful program it's a podcast called Divine Intervention. Brendan Hughes, it's a story in maybe 8 or 9 sections that is about something that happened about 4 blocks away from here at the Paulist Center, which is the birth of a Catholic protest and radical good trouble protest against the Vietnam War. His program is called Divine Intervention, The Secret and Hilarious and Tragic History of Boston's Catholic Anti-War Movement. That's November 30th, and it should be great because it promises to be sort of a homecoming of all these people in their 80s who were involved in that struggle. People like James Carroll, people like the Shusharts in Ipswich. Really looking forward to that program about the Paulist Center and about Catholic break-ins of draft offices and trials. It's a remarkable podcast. If you want to prepare and look up Divine Intervention, Brendan Hughes, it's a really wonderful thing to listen to. I've listened to it twice. And so there you go. So a Q&A. We have a cordless mic here for the people in the audience. And anybody online who wants to ask a question either in the YouTube chat or on Zoom, you could join us in person. I want to start, John, by asking you about that map. those two maps of 25 years ago, U.S. dominating trade, and now China dominating trade. It reminds me of a speaker we had here named Alfred McCoy from Madison, Wisconsin, a professor who talks about the same thing, which is that basically, in the span of those same 25 years, the United States spent how many trillions of dollars prosecuting wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, while at the same time, China spent a similar amount building roads and infrastructure and highways and stadiums. In Costa Rica, China built a stadium for the country. That's where I was born and grew up. And I just thought, I wondered if you'd reflect on that. And another story that I heard, which was that Xi Jinping was meeting with, I believe it was a president, either Obama or Bush, I don't remember which, but he suggested to this president, "Hey, let's do this Belt and Road Initiative together as to the two empires." And whichever president responded, "Oh, that would be a great idea. Let's look into that." It never got looked into it, and the two empires took two different courses of action. And I wonder if you'd just talk about that. Is this our destiny to be an empire of war? And is it really that different from China's destiny?
Well, thank you, Dean. So here's this map again. If anybody wants to see it, at the top, you've got 2001, at the bottom, 2023. So I certainly hope it's not our destiny to continue with wars, but sometimes it seems to me that that's part of the human condition. Although I think it's time that we moved beyond that. I've been thinking that all my life, and I'm hoping that what we're going through now will really force us to reevaluate, as I said earlier, who we are as humans on this planet, and not be consumed by war. And war is all about leaders taking power. It's not about the people. People never want wars. It's the leaders who benefit from them. The people don't benefit from wars. The leaders do, if you can say benefit at all. Yeah, China has done an amazing job all over the world of showing that it has more compassion. Whether it really does or not, who knows? Who is she? I don't know. Is he? We don't know. But what we do know, what I know, and just came back from this World Summit of Young Presidents Organization leaders, the YPO leaders around the world in Tbilisi, Georgia. And I kept hearing, and again, I was at another meeting in Nashville, Tennessee, sponsored by the Human Rights Foundation around Bitcoin, which is being used by oppressive of people who are oppressed to get around government currency policies. And at that meeting, there were 140 people representing 70 different countries. And what I kept hearing was how much they prefer now to turn to China than the United States, that they at least trust China to follow through on the deals it makes, the agreements it has, and that they see China as more benign than the United States. So if they need to take loans, and let's face it, the problem with countries and so much of the world, Africa, Latin America, that have resources, they don't have the technical ability to mine those resources and to do value added. And China offers to help them develop that. Now, I'm not trying to defend China. I think the goal, it seems to me that their goal is basically the same. It's creating an empire. However, I think they do have a message that the world trusts more. And they also have a message that's very appealing because they brought around 900 million people out of dire poverty. They had economic, that's twice almost 3 times the population of the United States. They had economic growth averaging 10% a year for 30 years. And that's a hell of a good story. You know, like if you're the leader of a developing country, uh, doesn't that appeal to you a lot more than the United States that has had where our federal minimum wage in real terms hasn't increased since the early 70s? What kind of a story is that? So I think, Dean, in answer to your question, and I want to thank you for including me in this program and in these conversations. Uh, China's doing a bang up job. And one of the other things that I find fascinating is that the first two economic hitmen books, it's a trilogy. The first two were published by a major publishing house in China in Mandarin, and they were popular, very popular. But my publisher and I, the US publisher and I, we didn't believe that China's publishing industry would buy the third version, which is the subtitle is China's Economic Hitman Strategy. And it goes into it a lot of detail. It's pretty critical of China. But it now, as I understand it, is a bestseller in China. They did buy it and they published it in Mandarin. I've got a cool copy of it right here. And it's doing really well. I keep getting requests for it and doing interviews on podcasts and social and Zoom and so forth in China, as I do in Russia. So it's really interesting to me that even though we say that information is suppressed in China, I have not had that experience with this book, and I know that it is to a large degree with social media, et cetera. What the Chinese then will turn around and tell me is, well, maybe your government doesn't suppress it quite that same way, but your government lies to you all the time, and your social media is just very, very, very divisive. So we look at both of these sides. And if you happen to be the leader of Costa Rica, which, yes, is turning more and more to China. I teach in Costa Rica every year. I have for many years. I spent a lot of time in Guatemala, spent a lot of time in Ecuador and Colombia. And all of these countries, their leader has to look at, if I need to side with anyone, who do I want? And perhaps even more important than that is that now they have an alternative to the United States, because ever since 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, the US has been the only alternative. And we used that window of opportunity to be really good guys badly. And now China steps in as an alternative. Thanks for asking.
We have a question right here. I don't think we'll be able to see your face, but we'll hear your voice.
We can see his face. That's all we want to see. We don't care about my face. To pick up on what you are saying, you can hear me, yes?
Yes.
Oh, good. You talk as though China's hitman is a negative, and I don't understand how your book evolved. But it's interesting that you said there was a attempt with Obama or Bush to combine the two countries in what they were trying to do. I don't think the U.S. can tolerate China's advances and has to counter that somehow. And I don't think it will do it through economics because of what you had said about the economic situation that the U.S. follows. I think what it will try to do is paint China as the enemy, and then sell or give arms to all the surrounding countries to say you have to protect yourself. If you look at the numbers, the U.S. has 750 bases overseas. China has one. The U.S. has something around 80 to 100 Air Force bases around the world. China has one, and the U.S. has something like 15 to 20 Navy bases around the world. China has one. China's all are in the same spot as they protect a particular strait, but they are not being militarily aggressive. They are being economically aggressive. And I see that as a positive. Bill McGibbon's latest book called Here Comes the Sun just paints China as having fantastic technological breakthroughs in wind and solar, and they are distributing that technology throughout the world. I'm just wondering why we don't say, let's get together with China and do this together rather than fight each other, and with results that have not been good. And what is your thoughts about that?
Well, it's the question, and I guess you'd have to ask Trump, Biden, Obama, all of our other leaders that question, because it seems to me to be a no-brainer that we need to get together, and we need to get together to really confront the existential problem that faces us all, and that's the death economy, climate change, and income inequality, species extinction, environmental destruction. And this competition between us and China is making that much worse. It's playing right into the death economy. So yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. We need to come together. And there's absolutely no reason why China shouldn't be producing all the rare minerals of the world, and we should be buying them from China. And then we should be selling things to China that we can do better. And some of that is our amazing technology that we develop and then China imitates. uh, this idea of comparative advantage and a global community. We're not going to survive as a species unless we become a global community. I'm convinced of that, and we haven't been moving in that direction. And incidentally, was not the one who said about Obama coming together with Xi. That was a news story to me that Dean presented. I don't know, but what it does seem to me is that we've never really made an attempt to soften our relationship with China, and perhaps Obama did it better than Trump is doing it. But this country uh, has seen China as the opponent and sometimes the enemy. It isn't. It shouldn't be. And as you very correctly point out, yeah, China has that one big base in Djibouti, but it isn't really even a military base so much as a resupply base. China does not have a history of aggression at all. It has a history of going back thousands of years of expanding its influence through trade. And people can point out, well, what about Hong Kong and um, what's Hong Kong? My mind's just going blank now. Um, its immediate region, which also includes the territory that it disputes with India, um, and yet China would say, well, these are all part of our territory. It's like you guys taking over Mexico or half of Mexico back when you created California and New Mexico and Arizona, et cetera. We've always seen these areas as being part of China. And when Chiang Kai-shek was defeated by the Chinese communists, he moved off to the island, and now that's seen as an enemy, and so it is seen as an enemy. So people like to point out, well, China's so aggressive to Hong Kong, but it's just within its own very area that it considers to be its own territory. I'm not justifying that, but it hasn't done that in the rest of the world. It doesn't have military bases, like you said, essentially, except possibly that one. The United States, actually, I think it has more than the 700, whatever the number was you call. I think it's now over 1,000. Anyway. It's lots and lots of military bases that the United States has, and almost nobody wants a foreign military base on their soil. We sure as hell didn't in Boston back in 1770s. Yeah, Boston hated the fact that it was occupied by British forces, and we still wouldn't want that. I'm often struck by the humor of President Correa of Ecuador, who actually became a friend of mine too, when under Bush, The U.S. had a huge military base in Ecuador, and the lease came up to be renewed under Bush, and Bush asked Correa, he said, so I want to renew the lease on the base. And Correa said, well, you can renew your lease on the base here in Ecuador if you'll give me a lease to build a base, an Ecuadorian military base in Florida. So the base was not renewed. Ecuador doesn't have a U.S. military base anymore. That military base moved next door to Colombia. But the fact of the matter is, most countries don't want foreign military on their soil. Thanks. That was a great question and information that you provided. Appreciate it.
Let's see. Anybody else? Um, uh, I wonder if you would tell us what you know about Venezuela.
Well,
And
somebody has their hand up. I
what's
think
what's going on?
Dean, I can see Ed has his hand up.
Oh, who?
Ed.
Yes. Hi.
Ed. Oh, go ahead, Ed.
Well, I read your book way back when a friend of mine had to leave Brazil because of the dictatorship there. And I've noticed that you've followed, you've been around the world doing financial relations. But I'd like to ask about, let's say, relations where you're dealing with social media and and you have to deal with people. So, for instance, the United States runs the National Endowment for Democracy, and then they use the APAC. APAC is doing social media work in the United States, and then the USAID funded a lot of like journalists and news organizations in other countries. And did you find that and when you worked in South America and in any of the meetings that you just went to, was there much talk about how much, let's say, public, like a social contact, so that you can have people agree with you, or also with the people in the country, so that they would maybe fight each other and overthrow the present government if the government wasn't liked by the United States?
Uh, I'm not quite sure I understand. It is the question that if the government wasn't liked by the United States, were we sending in operatives to encourage people to try to overthrow the government?
No, I've read that many of the National Endowment for Democracy, NAD, would provide grants to journalists and newspapers to write stories. And we do need good public relations for the United States for lots of things, because it may not be good in the country that we're talking to, but also it also leads to disinformation.
Uh-huh. Yeah, absolutely. We have an incredibly long history of using propaganda in local and getting local journalists to do that. So always before we've overthrown governments, for example, with these in Panama, first with the plane crash of Omar Torrijos, and later when we went in and took out Noriega, who was a really bad person. I'm not defending Noriega. But also, we've done this with Allende in Chile. We did it with Mossadegh in Iran. We've done it around the world. Before we go in and take out a leader, we get the press in that country and in the United States to paint these people as usually communists. And that still is occurring, communists.
Mhm.
And certainly that's happening now with Venezuela. And I'm no defender of Maduro by any means. But this whole propaganda machine that we put to work, it's hard sometimes for anybody to understand what's really going on. And a case in point is what is the propaganda around China right now. We tend to make China look like the bad guy. Even some of our more liberal press, the New York Times doesn't. I don't think they have a very balanced view of China, and I'm not exactly sure why, but it certainly works to their advantage. I one time asked the New York Times correspondent or chief of whatever of Latin America who was interviewing me. I asked him, so why don't you print some of the truth about the United States as covert activities in Latin America? You know these are going on, or not even necessarily covert, but underhanded activities. And he said to me, well, there's no censorship on my writing for the New York Times, but I have an editor, and the editor reports to the publisher, and the publisher reports to advertisers. And so if I write an article that some of our advertisers don't like, my editor won't publish it. And if I don't get published, so many articles every month, I'll lose my job. So I know so it's self-censorship to a certain degree. Uh, and I think that's a very unknown and dangerous aspect of what we call our freedom of press, our freedom of information. And now we've got social media, which could counterbalance that, as some people have likened social media to the Gutenberg press. That, before that, the Catholic Church had control over basically everything that was written and published because the monks all did it by hand. And then the Gutenberg press came out and freed things. Well, social media does that, but it also then really opens the door to all kinds of lies and misinformation and so on and so forth. I don't know how we get around that, frankly. But yes, the United States has been very, very successful at propaganda campaigns around the world, and still is. I mean, right now, look at this idea that every boat that's out there in the Caribbean, anywhere near Venezuela, must be a drug runner. That's complete BS. Maybe increasingly true because no fishermen want to go out there anymore. Legitimate, fishermen from the Caribbean, a lot of people make their living off that. You got to imagine that these guys are terrified. I hope that helped, Ed. I don't know.
Mhm.
Of deceased fishermen decrying what's going on, but those governments won't speak out against the United States like they should be, out of fear, I think. Is there anybody else with a question or an observation, either here in person or online? Somebody else, Amar? Lynn. Please join us, Lynn.
Yes, hello, thank you. I've known about you, John Perkins. I helped start with my Army captain brother, Veterans for Peace and Code Pink. So anyway, I wanted to talk to you about NIB, the National Infrastructure Bankers Coalition. Are you aware of that group of bankers that have gone to nonprofit banking systems? Do you know
Well,
about them?
I've heard about it, but I can't say that I know very much about them. No, tell me.
Okay. Well, anyway, it ties into the nextcities.org, and they're beautiful what they're doing, and in conjunction with these new public banking systems, sort of like Ellen Brown set up, in California, tried to get out there. I think North Dakota might have sort of a system. Anyway, also to civicaction.org. Our library systems are amazing what they're doing. They can help bring in the shift of our consciousness. And also to just two other things. The Schiller Institute, I'm trying to get everybody to get connected with them, especially you, someone like you with your background in other continents. They already use language apps, and they're with the International Peace Coalition every week, and they have leaders from all over the world. They use language apps, and they say their whole mission statement is, let's start to build, let's stop killing, let's stop the warring, we got to build together. Okay, and now we've got the Vatican Nation, which it turns out is the largest widespread nation on the planet, more than China, and they have $80 trillion to play with. They need to pay back with what they've done with the start of big pharma. Man-made drugs came through and used it on all the indigenous cultures. You can go to murderbydecree.com. Kevin Annette, defrock priest, the information of what started happening. And then it ties into your work, how you thought you were getting into peace, and then you slipped into the corporate banking programs. So the other tie into all of this is behavioral science, behavioral science, behavioral science. The biggest science on the planet right now, by far, any human, red, yellow, black, white, whatever, any age, baby on to death, your answers are inside of your soul grid. Your answers are inside of you. For in past lives should be mandatory, dream therapy, art, music. I've been doing alternative healing as a registered nurse in 2 countries. Canada, I loved it. I work with Haida Indians. I work with lots of different Indian cultures, and tell you, it is so critical to
Lynn,
set
do you
up.
have a question by any chance?
Yeah, how do we get the funding to get multicultural body, mind, spirit, alternative healing centers in every single community? Because the answers are within. We can do inner peace training, soul work, healing touch programs, animal therapy, art, comedy therapy. All the therapy is missing that humans aren't being taught. Give them jobs. They're already online. There's thousands on LinkedIn.com. There's hundreds on Skype. Anyway, so how do we get these healing bases set up in every single community with language apps? The answers are within. Any human with EarthCam, we have behavioral science, EarthCam, we have cell phones, internet to use and say, hey, you're angry, upset, get some help. Find out who you are, why you're here,
Question,
and
Lynn?
give them a caring job. My petition is about caring jobs. Get the legislation for caring jobs, not warring jobs. Okay? I put it on.
Thank you, Lynn.
Petition. Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, John.
Well, thanks, Lynn. Well, it's all about passion, and you obviously have it, Lynn. So, yeah, get out there and raise that money. I can't tell you how to do that. I'm not a fundraiser. I've never have been very good at it. I've founded several nonprofits, and I always find someone else to do the fundraising because I'm not very good at it. But what I would say, and I guess I'd like to leave people with this idea. I'm getting some feedback and echo. Is there any way you can stop that when I'm talking? Okay, that's better. Can you hear me? Yes, good. Okay, so I like to tell everybody, what can you do individually? Well, there's all kinds of things that we all know about: eat less meat, use less fossil fuels, da 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 da. But I think beyond all of that, there's 5 questions that we each can answer. And I think, Lynn, that was a great lead into this. And the first question is, what do I most want to do for the rest of my life? It doesn't matter how old you are. And I think a number of people, as I looked at the room, are probably close to my age. I'm 80, maybe more, maybe a little less, whatever. And I'm excited about continuing to do what I do, which is right. So my answer to that question, what do I most want to do for the rest of my life, is I want to write. I love to write. I enjoy it immensely. But I have a friend who's a carpenter, and he says, I want to work with my hands in wood, kind of the opposite of a writer. The second question is, how do I do that in a way that helps to transform the death economy to a life economy? And I would say, well, I'm going to write about things that inspire people to do that. And my carpenter friend would say, well, I'm only going to use sustainable materials, sustainable woods, and I'm going to plant a tree for every tree that gets cut down to provide the wood for my job. But we can all relate to that. There's a way. And the third question is, what's stopping me? What's that jaguar standing in my path? What's holding me back? What's the barrier? And I might say as a writer, well, I know that to be a successful writer, I've really got to write for a couple of hours every day or almost every day. I just don't have time. And my carpenter friend might say, well, my clients don't want to pay the extra price for sustainable materials or to get me to plant trees. So the fourth question is, when you touch that jaguar, when you confront that obstacle rather than running from it, rather than denying it, how does that change your perception? And so I would say as a writer, well, wait a minute, I could turn off the television for 2 hours every night or get up a little earlier in the morning and write. And my carpenter friend would say, well, I'm going to tell my clients that the extra price is not a cost, it's an investment in the future, their children's future, the future. And the fifth question is, what actions do I take? Because remember, it's actions. So our perceptions change, impact our actions, and our actions change reality. So what actions do I take immediately? Well, for a writer, I got to write. I got to figure out what to write and write about it. And the carpenter said, you got to start using these sustainable materials and not just use them, but tell his clients, this is what I'm doing because you're investing in the future. This is an important investment you're making. And so I think we can all do that, regardless of what we are. And if you think you're retired or you just want to go out and play golf, well, play golf. But if you're going to play golf, then use it as a forum for everybody you play golf with and everybody around you to talk about transforming the death economy to a life economy. Whatever it is, we can all play a role, but we have to do what we most want to do for the rest of our lives, because that's the only way we're really successful. So I think again that this is an extremely wonderful time to be alive. And 80 years old, I'm looking at, I don't know how long I'm going to live, but I know the probability is it's going to be a lot less than it was when I was 40. And so, but I want to use these years to really enjoy doing what I do, but also do it in a way that transform a death economy to a life economy. And Lynn, I would suggest you really go after this problem of how do you raise money for the cause that you believe in. I can't tell you how to do that, but there are people out there that can be a huge help to you. Don't ever give up that passion.
John Perkins, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And in ending here, before we go to a beautiful lunch that Luis Guzman has made for us, and during which we will be talking to Reverend John Perkins, our new affiliate minister, I want to. I'm sorry, John Gibbons. I just anointed you, and what's it called? I just ordained you, John. We will have a conversation with Reverend John Gibbons. I also want to point out that we have two folks who are going to sign our membership book today. That's Paul and Barbara. Welcome, and invite all of you to come and become members. Right now, it's a sort of a physical thing. You sort of need to be from nearby and be here physically, but maybe we need to expand our definition of membership to the universe. Anyway, welcome, and just join us and become a part of what we do here. Have a hand in our programming. Have a hand in our decisions about what we do with this beautiful and ornery ass headache building that we have here. And join us again. John, I thought again to end with the words of Pete Seeger. Don't you know it's darkest before the dawn, but this thought keeps me moving on. It's too high. If we could heed these early warnings, the time is now, quite early morning. If we could heed these early warnings, the time is now, quite early morning. Some say that human beings won't long exist, but but what makes them so doggone sure? I know that you who hear my singing could make these freedom bells go ringing. I know that you can hear my singing, would make these freedom bells go ringing. Darkest before the dawn. Thank you, John, and thank you, everybody. Join us here at Community Church anytime. Stop by during the week and get a tour of our building, of our different archival materials from 105 years of history. Our Sacco and Vanzetti archive on the 3rd floor. Enormous amount of primary source materials about that case, which is intertwined with our history. And thank you again, John Perkins. Get a copy of our newsletter as you walk out the door, and let's have lunch together. Over and out to everybody. Meeting at the building is over.